Our interview this morning is with Larry Odneal. Larry was born in Dallas, Texas in July of 1947. He served in the United States Navy August of 1970 through April of 2001. Highest rank attained was Commander in 05. This interview was conducted at Burleson, Texas on Friday, September the 3rd, 2010. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I'm not related to Larry in any way. Also in the room is Milton Gibson, who is our videographer. This interview is conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress and for Operation Remember with the city of Burleson, Texas. And with that short intro, Larry, you can tell us about your time in the Navy, sir.
Be glad to. Appreciate that. I guess I'll start off with just an East Texas boy, born and raised in East Texas area, Dallas. I lived in Greenville, Texas my whole life. I went to school at A&M and graduated with A&M at Commerce. And on a Friday night and on Saturday morning mail, I had a draft notice next day. So I had to make a decision whether I wanted to join the Army or look for other services, and I decided to go in the Navy. Joined up for a 6-year commitment for a nuclear power program. I wanted something challenging, and that definitely sounded challenging, just graduated from college. I was a business major, so that really sounded pretty challenging to me. So I enlisted in the Navy, and immediately within a month, they were shipping me off to boot camp in Orlando, Florida. And I spent the next 6 months down there in the rain and the heat, playing enlisted boot camp. I was enlisted E2, and finished Orlando camp there in 6 months, and they transferred me to Great Lakes, Illinois, to machinist mate, Class A school, nuclear power. So I spent the winter, never been too far from Texas before, and the winter up in Chicago was really enlightening, shoveling snow, that kind of thing. Got married in '68, so I've been married a couple of years. The wife and I moved up there. She went with me the whole time, and we lived in a little apartment, efficiency apartment in an old hospital. That's all we could afford. We didn't make much money as an E5, and served as E4, and then got promoted to E5 while I was there. But we had not enough money to buy enough beans and rice and a few things to eat. We just didn't have a lot of money to eat. And to go out to the club or anything else, I'd go and donate blood. And that was the way we had extra spending money to go do that. Otherwise, didn't have enough money to do anything other than just go to school. Finished there, graduated in my class there. Next duty station was nuclear power school in Vallejo, California. So Navy moved us all the way out there, and we drove out there and got a little apartment off base. And this was a 6-month school of nuclear power training in Vallejo. Had the wife waitressing. She had a little extra income coming in there, and I went to school every day. That was a good experience, living in the height of the hippie area in San Francisco. And during that period of time was in the 70, 71 area. So that was pretty interesting to see on your off-duty time, to see what was going on at that time in the Haight-Ashbury section of San Francisco. And at that time, we had a little Volkswagen bus that we drove around. That's what we owned, so that was kind of fun. Graduated from there and transferred to nuclear power training units, Schenectady, New York. Navy's wisdom, Utah was just real close to California, but they chose to move me to Schenectady, New York, cross country. So we traded in our bus and bought us a new little Pinto, which was the newest thing for Ford at that time. And we tried to drive across country to Schenectady, New York. And halfway up there in the middle of the night, up in somewhere around between Cleveland and Detroit and heading towards New York, the engine blew up on a brand new car. So we were kind of delayed getting there, having to rent a car and the expenses and all that kind of stuff. But we finally got to the school and got in touch there, and that was an interesting experience for almost a year. It was rotating shifts. We worked day shift one week, next week swing shift, next week gray shift. Get a day off, go through the whole thing again, get 2 days off, go through the whole day again, do 3 days off, and then start all over. So your body didn't know which way you were going, coming, eating, or drinking. I think they did that on purpose, but the whole point of the training was the discipline and keeps how your body would react to working long hours on the ship as nuclear power. I graduated from there and was having orders to the USS Enterprise as a second-class machinist mate, nuclear power. About the same time, the last week or two I was there, I got notice I was accepted for officer candidate school. And I said, well, that'd be great. I've just finished nuclear power school. I can be an officer in nuclear power training. Just finished a year of training, well, 2 years of training, counting Vallejo. They said, no, 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 you've got a business degree. We need you as a supply corps officer. I said, okay, if that's what you like. I'll be fine with me. Navy sometimes does some strange things, but the needs of the Navy always come first, and they needed supply officers at that time. And even though I'd spent $500,000 in education and training for 2 years, they decided to make me a supply officer. So promptly, instead of going to Enterprise, they canceled those orders. I had orders to OCS in Newport, Rhode Island. Newport, Rhode Island was a great experience. I went there between classes, so I got to shovel some more snow. Of course, your wife can't be with you up there. It's basically another boot camp. I went through Orlando, now I'm going through officer boot camp. And so I was one of the unique people that gets to go through 2 boot camps. And it was kind of interesting, other than the cold up there and the wind, standing duty out on these little yippy boats that they had you do. But it was a very interesting tour, enjoyed it, and learned a lot of things about ship navigation, those kind of things that I'd never used as a supply officer. But I enjoyed my time up there, and my wife came up to spend a couple of weeks there just before I graduated. And the neat thing about that place was my daughter was conceived there, so that was a highlight of my life there. So anyway, we had orders, once I graduated from OCS, I had orders to Athens, Georgia, to Navy Supply Corps School. That's a 6-month training school. So we got in our car, moved down to Athens, Georgia, and we attended school there, finished there. About halfway through there, we were playing softball on the weekend, base team and everything. I played a lot of softball. And I had a little collision around second base and got completely knocked out and quit breathing and heart stopped. Had an ER nurse on the field, was over there on one of the coaches. She came and resuscitated me and brought me back and threw me in an ambulance down to Fort Gordon with my 9-month pregnant wife sitting in the ambulance with me going there. I didn't come conscious till the next day. So it was kind of an eye-opening experience, I guess, for her anyway. But everything worked out okay. I was fine. I only broke a collarbone, and that was the only physical injury I got from it. It was just a collision at second base. Shortstop, second baseman ran together, knocked heads, and came to the ground. But anyway, that was kind of interesting. Graduated from Supply Corps School and had orders to the USS Wainwright in Charleston, South Carolina as a supply officer. I was in charge of 3 of the 4 areas on the department of a 500-man ship. I was in charge of food service, dispersing, and other ship services. The other supply officer was in charge of ship stores. This is basically the repair parts and those kind of things. He was a senior supply officer, and I was a junior supply officer. In other words, I did all the work, and he got all the glory, but that's okay. That's the way that works sometimes. As an ensign in the Navy, you get that kind of thing. So that was kind of interesting. Finished, worked, 2.5, 3 years there on the ship. We had some ministering tours, had a deployment to the Med, had a deployment to South America, had a tour at Gitmo. Interesting tour on one of the deployments to the Med. We were the first warship to enter the Black Sea and have a week in Constanța, Romania. And we're the first ship to do that since World War II. So that was an interesting trip. They just opened up the country for us, took us on tours and showed us the country, and were great hosts to us. And it was a very outstanding time on the ship. We were a very senior ship with a senior captain, so we got to do a lot of those kind of things. We're also the lead ship on the bicentennial celebration in New York Harbor in July 1976. So we also got the Battle E efficiency for those 2 tours while I was on board the ship. So that's one of the awards that I wear. Very enlightening tour, very hard tour. On board ship, you spend 24 hours a day. You probably work 18 to 20 hours of that. You might get 4 hours of sleep if you're lucky. As a supply officer, I didn't stand a lot of watches. I was being responsible for 3 major departments, so I was pretty well tied up all the time. I did get tabbed with one collateral duty. The ship's captain had me in charge of the movies in the wardroom every night. So I had to select movies and make sure it ran, make sure it was good, make sure everything, the popcorn was ready, that kind of stuff. I was food service officer, so I had all that anyway. But that was kind of a neat collateral duty. Still standing watches. I got to run the movies on the ship every night. Finished my tour of the Wainwright. Wainwright has been later decommissioned about 4 or 5 years after that. I had orders back to Texas, believe it or not. I had a choice duty down to Beeville, Texas Air Station as the exchange officer, which is basically the Navy side of retail. I ran all the retail services on the base, gas station, laundry, vending machines, base clubs, retail stores. I was the only military person there. Everybody else was civilian, so I had like 35, 40, 50 people working for me as civilians. So I really enjoyed exchange officers. That's kind of why I ended up doing my career later on out of the Navy as retail. So I did that for, 2.5 years, and had a choice of duty stations from Beeville. I could go to either Iceland or I could go to Bermuda. Thought about a couple of seconds about that, said, I think I'll go to Bermuda. And I went there for, I guess, almost 3 years. Great tour of duty. The island of Bermuda is a beautiful place. Of course, my wife and daughter were there with me, and we had a great time. As a department head, as a senior lieutenant, I worked straight for the captain, so I didn't have any of the political problems that a lot of department heads had. And I worked with all the dependents on the base real closely to make sure everything they wanted and they needed. While I was there on that tour, it was a very satisfying tour. They had probably 15 to 20 different retail outlets spread out throughout the island. And I condensed all those and closed down most of them, made one big, large retail unit on the main base. And about $8 or $10 million facility I helped design and build and implement it. So that was pretty gratifying to get that done and implement it, and really saved the government a lot of money, a lot of time, and really was a great facility. Henceforth, I guess in the last 5 years or so after that, they closed that base down. So it seemed like there's a story here. Every places things get decommissioned or closed down, so I don't know how that works. But we really had a good time there, and my wife, about almost 12 years in, decided she had enough of the Navy. We'd been moving coast to coast from Chicago to California to New York to Georgia to Charleston to everywhere in between, back down to Texas and out to Bermuda. She decided she had enough of the Navy and decided if I wanted to go with her, that'd be fine. If not, then she was going. So we went ahead and resigned from the Navy. At, I guess it's about 10-year mark, so 10 years active duty. I resigned from my commission, moved back to Texas, joined the reserves here at Navy Dallas, NAS Dallas. And I spent the next 20 years in reserves doing various duties here and there and yonder. Just a quick synopsis of a few of them. Let me get my notes here real quick. Fell off my tail. Too many numerous, but the first unit we came to was called an Advanced Base Functional Unit, which was a mixture of all kinds of different ratings. We went to different bases and supported all kinds of facilities in reserve. 2 weeks we'd go different places, from air stations to West Coast and East Coast. And that was pretty enlightening to learn how the reserves worked and how that part of the Navy functioned. It was a little bit different than active duty. Typically, when my first couple of weekends in reserves, you go and you have a headache. You say, well, let me go to the base and get some medicine. Can't get any medicine. You're not active duty. So they wouldn't even give you aspirin. So it's kind of a shock to me to spend 10 years in active duty and you try to go get something from the hospital and they won't give you anything. So I was kind of concerned about that initially, but got over that. I had several other units there in Navy Dallas. I joined NAS Kingsville. I was promoted to lieutenant commander while I was in that unit. We went to, every summer we'd go down to Kingsville, spend 2 weeks down there, and did that for about 3 years. Pretty enlightening tour. Since I'd been to Beeville before as exchange officer, I was familiar with Kingsville and the Corpus Christi area, so that was pretty easy for me to take charge of what was going on down there. I then affiliated with the Naval Patrolling Office Unit, which was a completely different side of the Navy I'd ever seen. It was dealing with oil reserves and the storage of oil and how that supply went for the ships in the air. This unit went traveling around different stations, air stations, East and West Coast. We had tours of duty in Hawaii, San Francisco, East Coast, a lot of great tours. A couple of them got to take the wife, especially Hawaii, San Francisco were nice 2 and 3 week tours. But the reserves are interesting. They did a lot of nice travel areas and did some things that were totally different than active duty. To give you a chance to mix with active duty when you're out there, and I enjoyed doing that kind of thing. From there, we went to the Comfair Westpac unit, which was Asian unit that's deployed to Korea and Japan, mostly Japan. I made 3 tours over in Japan. They were all 3 weeks in length. We did a lot of different things over there, different exercises that the Navy has, and we participated as a Navy sponsor for them, procuring supplies and taking care of the berthing and any of the other things we need for our groups. As a supply officer in a reserve unit, that's pretty much my job, is make sure berthing and berthing and all their food needs are taken care of. Anything else that we need, transportation, anything to do with the base, I coordinate all those kind of things for our troops. from Confair Westpac, I went to the Seabees, which is another part of the Navy I'd never had any affiliation with. I was the 9th Regiment Supply Officer, so I was Regimental Supply Officer for 2 battalions. That was also stationed at NAS Dallas. While I was there, I had 2 battalions. One of the battalions was voted best in the Seabees for that year, so that was really a feather in everybody's regiment's hat, and I think I felt a big part of that because I was in charge of all the inventory, making sure everything was where it needed to be. So enjoyed that. From that tour as a regiment, I was promoted to commander, and I really enjoyed that tour there. That's probably one of the most enjoyable tours I had in reserves. Upon my promotion to commander, I was moved to the commanding officer's billet, Naval Supply Center, Oakland. First and only command assignment, completely different than any other kind of assignment I'd had as just a supply officer. Now I'm commanding officer of a whole unit of men and responsible for their welfare. And really enjoyed that tour. That's probably a highlight of my reserve tour. 2 years. We go out to Oakland once a quarter instead of 2 weeks during the summer, and we had a lot more time to do some things out there. And during our trips to Oakland, we did all kinds of things to improve the facilities there. We worked with the supply department there and improved things there, and worked in all different areas of their departments. But that was really an outstanding tour, getting to know the people and doing everything you could do to help those guys. Responsibilities of command were completely different as just a supply officer, so I really enjoyed that. That was a great responsibility, but very satisfying. The next tour I went to was the Navy liaison officer with FEMA here in Denton, which was a total different part of the Navy. I tried to do different jobs so I wouldn't be stuck in the same type of reserve job. I worked with FEMA for almost 6 years, 3 years on active duty as far as drill pay, and 2 years as volunteer. We went to many things with FEMA. I was at Oklahoma City disaster, the bombing. Been to a couple of hurricane disasters in Puerto Rico and in Louisiana. We went around training the Army, the 5th Army. That was our major priority, was to train those guys for disaster relief. We went to all the Oklahoma bases, Fort Sill, Fort Hood, the one in San Antonio, and just just training Army personnel what to do in case of disaster relief. And that was our priorities. We also flew off to other places in New Mexico, anywhere in the 5-state area that FEMA covered: Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Texas, and Louisiana. Many trips to New Orleans to discuss hurricane preparedness. This was before Katrina, and we had all these plans in place, and come to find out the plans weren't good enough. But much of the things that were talked about during Katrina, we had already made plans, and with the Louisiana National Guard and everything else. It was interesting to me to see how that unfolded and how that worked, but it's very satisfying to see that we tried to make a smooth thing for them, but they just didn't listen too well. It just didn't work out. But we did spend a lot of time trying to train the National Guard there in Louisiana on hurricane problems. Those were the reserve tours. I think my 30 years, I really enjoyed them. The Navy, I've missed it a lot. I retired in 2001. The 10 years were great, and I probably would have spent another 10 years if the wife had stayed. But I made that decision at the time, and I've really enjoyed the 20 years here and all the different type of commands I got to do with. I think it was very challenging to me, and I think it helped me in my career with retail when I worked with 7-Eleven, and the last 8 years with PetSmart and retail. So that's where we are today. I've retired from 7-Eleven. I'm retired from PetSmart, and now I'm going to enjoy retired life and see how that is and see where life takes me from here. That's about it.
Good. It's interesting to me, all those different facets of the Navy that you saw. I don't think we've talked to anyone that, and you did that consciously to broaden your experience. That's
yes, sir.
I
wanted to be challenged at all times, and doing the same thing would not challenge me. And people that know me know that I like a challenge, and that's why I went to different routes.
Let me go back to the nuclear power program. You were accepted into the Navy's nuclear power program.
Yes.
For those who maybe are unaware, do you know the percentage of enlisted men who were accepted into the nuclear program? It's a pretty select program is what I'm saying, Larry.
Yeah, I don't know the percents, but it's very small. I didn't have a science degree, but had exceptionally high scores on the test, so I was accepted for the program. But even the rate that graduated was less than 10%. They didn't even finish the courses. And I went through both training at the school, and the Schenectady, New York thing was actual hands-on training with a nuclear reactor in the unit. The previous school was just for schoolwork.
Was that in association with GE up there?
Yes.
Okay. So by the
It's really
time...
Saratoga Springs, New York is where it's located. It says Schenectady, but it's Saratoga Springs, New York.
Good skiing in the winter.
Yeah, if you like to shovel your car out of snow every morning, and we had 120 inches of snow that winter, and had to hook your car up to electric to get it to start in the mornings, and you had to drive from in town out in the country where the nuclear reactor was, and it was very entertaining, to say the least.
For a boy out of Greenville, Texas, you got to see a lot of snow.
That was a lot of snow, lots of snow.
If we go back to the nuclear power program, by the time you finished the training at Schenectady, and I might have my chronology a little out of whack here, but you also went to nuclear machinist mate school.
Yeah, that was the first school in nuclear
That was the
power.
first,
That was your basic
and then
training.
Schenectady was after.
And then Vallejo, nuclear power
Okay.
school. You go to MMA school in Chicago, Great Lakes, Illinois. They do your basic machinist mate training. And then you went to nuclear power school in Vallejo, which gives you your technical nuclear power training. And then you went to Schenectady, New York for hands-on working with the reactor.
By the time you finished your training at Schenectady, the general pool of the whole Navy, you were probably within 1%?
Yeah, it'd be that much or less.
So you were really a specialized, and I don't mean to blow your horn a whole bunch, Larry, but you were in a very, very select program. You're a pretty smart guy to get that far, or you took orders well, you did something well, but it is just, so folks understand, that is just a very, very select program that you were in.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it. It was very big, very challenging, and very difficult. They tried to make it difficult as they can because, like I say, on the reactor, we shifted shifts. I think they did that for a purpose, but it certainly was challenging. It was tough on the family, and it was tough on you personally, but it's something you had to get through, and that's how they had the discipline to learn the procedures and what you had to do to save lives, because if you're dealing with nuclear power, you have to be exact and you have to be accurate.
So then we get orders to OCS. I guess they were orders that you got to OCS in Newport. 16 weeks?
I think it was 12 to 16 weeks, 3.5 months.
You're there in the winter or the summer?
Winter again. So I really had 3 tours of winter in the Northeast, but for a Texas boy, that was a challenge. You know, the first time was a real eye-opener. The second time was really wide open, and hell, by the time I went to Newport, it was secondhand.
I guess you didn't do any sailing or whatever when you were...
No sailing. We had to stand watches out in the yips out there sitting on the water in the cold and the wind and the snow, and they make us stand 4-hour watches out there just to get used to the cold and just discipline things, I think.
OCS, you had already spent time on the parade ground learning left turn, right turn, all that good stuff. You got that, I guess, at boot camp,
Yes,
right?
sir.
So when you got to OCS, you got a second dose of all that again.
It was a second dose, but on a little lighter level. It wasn't quite as intense as enlisted boot camp.
Okay.
But I was ahead of most of the guys because I'd already done all those things. So I was kind of a squad leader and helped them out and make sure we did okay with that.
Then you went to Athens to supply school.
Correct.
Okay. When you came out of supply school, you were still an ensign? Were you a JG?
Still ensign.
Still an ensign. Okay. You went pretty quickly. You had a tour at Gitmo. Tell us, did you get to take the family to Gitmo?
No, that was just a 6-month, what they call a refresher training for the ship. So we were gone from deployment almost 6 months.
You were on the Wainwright.
On the Wainwright.
Okay.
The wife didn't get to go. This was just the ship.
So you had a 6-month tour in Gitmo, but you were on the Wainwright. So were you operating?
Operating the area, yeah.
Okay.
We'd come in, a few days a week for supplies and R&R and that kind of thing. But generally, you're out in the ocean for 24 hours straight doing General quarters for drills and firing guns, firing missiles. It's strictly war training, refresher training.
Viegas, I think, is the place you go to shoot. But
it's out there somewhere, some island that we tore the hell out of. That's Puerto Rican, I think.
Yeah.
So we did tear that up pretty good.
R&R. You didn't go back into Gitmo for R&R, did you?
That's the only place you went. And
didn't take you down to Kingston, Montego Bay, all those places?
We did one weekend in Kingston, actually. But they had a nice officer club there, and they had an outdoor movie and a swimming pool and a tennis court. So, you got to do some things. I didn't get as much time as everybody else as a supply officer. I was busy doing things for the ship, getting refitted with food and water and everything else we needed to get done, port services, and doing those kind of things for the ship. So a little bit of time I did get to enjoy a little bit of tennis playing while I was there. I played in a local tennis tournament and actually won it. And that ticked a few locals off. They didn't like ship people participating in their events. But it was kind of interesting. It was a lot of fun. A lot of work, but a lot of fun.
The Wainwright, hull number CG 28? Okay. What is that CG?
It's a heavy cruiser. I don't know why. It's a guided missile cruiser. I guess that's why it's called CG.
Do you have some communication capability, a command vessel kind of a thing?
Yeah, it was. We were a senior vessel. We had the senior captain when we had deployments, so it didn't have any special communication. Yeah, he was a very senior four-striper. So we were always in port next to the pier. Everybody else had to drop anchor out in the bay, and so we had a few advantages that other people didn't have.
But along with those few advantages went a certain amount of spit and polish.
A lot of spit and polish. Like I said, we were the lead ship for the bicentennial celebration in New York in July. 76?
Right.
Yeah, so that was a pretty, I'd left the ship about a month before. I did all the work and all the preparation, then didn't get to do the thing, but that's okay.
Somewhere along the line you got an E, the efficiency, E, excellence, efficiency,
it's an award to the ship, and I think that was for what we did for the bicentennial celebration. And
that was a supply division E or the overall?
It was a ship E.
The whole thing, okay. Okay. I don't have the proper title down here, but the naval oil thing. That's all the oil they have in the salt domes, wherever?
Yeah, wherever, plus, places like Hawaii's got some domes underground where they keep a lot of oil. And San Francisco Bay Area got a lot of storage of oil facilities there. And the east and west coast are mostly where all their oil is stored. This was the overall management group that manages all the petroleum for the Navy.
Managed petroleum, the logistics, distribution.
All of that. And we were a reserve unit assigned to go help these different units wherever the places were. And they were generally under supply center control.
Okay. Comfair Pac West. You deployed to Japan?
Japan.
Did you go over there on a ship from the West Coast?
No, we flew.
You flew?
We always flew.
And your duties when you got there were at a supply center, or?
They were at whatever the air base we went to. We went to several different air bases in Japan and set up our own individual units in support of the exercises we used. Navy runs several exercises, and that's pretty much what we did. We could, supported all different exercises the Navy had in Japan. Same thing as what we did in Korea, the same type of unit.
Just maybe for little reference, how many items in a Navy supply system?
Oh, geez. The whole Navy supply system?
Yeah, round figures.
I wouldn't even have an estimate. I wouldn't have any idea.
In the millions?
No. Hundreds of thousands. I don't know if it'd be millions, probably hundreds of thousands. Just on the ship, it was, seemed like it was like 180,000 different SKUs we carried on the ship.
And that would be repair parts?
Repair parts.
Stuff for ship store?
Ammunition.
Stuff for the mess decks? Ammunition?
Consumables, ammunition, repair parts.
And you had
food items, retail store items.
You had the responsibility to replenish all of that? Make sure it was on board? You had responsibility for, say, the dollars shown or that you sold in a ship store?
Yeah, I had the responsibility for the budget and
Okay.
replenishment and just the execution of making sure we had the right food stores for the galleys and had all the proper things for the services, for the laundry and everything else.
Also had dispersing clerks to pay people.
I was dispersing officer. That time we didn't have all the things we have today. We had a handwritten log that we had to do, and we paid by cash on the mess decks. A lot different today.
That was my next question. Did you still pay by?
We did back then.
Yes.
I did, that was a fun thing. Twice a week we'd go out there and do that, and line them up.
My tour, we got paid on the mess decks,
Yep.
and the dispersing people would come on board with a satchel and a couple of guys with 45s.
Well, I carried a 45. When I go to the bank to get the money, I'd keep on deployment in the Med. I'd keep $1 million in a safe. That was
Cash?
Cash, $1 million.
Wow.
Because I had to pay, and a lot of it was foreign currency. Every different port we had to go to, I had to get foreign currency to pay port services, pay the crew so they could exchange some money and not have to pay out the ear on the base and out in town. So you had to deal with all the foreign currencies and all the port services, and of course you had to pay everybody.
Changes in currency valuation, dollar versus yen.
Constant.
Create any problems for you, or that was constant limbo thing?
It was constant change. Every port you went into was different, and you had to keep track of it every day. You had to balance your ledger. So whatever your currency you had was whatever it was that day. You had to balance it, and it plus or minus every day. And at the end of the tour, if it was a plus, that was great. You just made an entry to gave it to the government. If it was a negative, you just wrote it off. What happened?
When you're in Japan, do you buy anything for the mess from local vendors, Japanese vendors?
Everything was coordinated through the base supply department, so we just request from them what we needed, and they would procure and get it to us.
Okay, so you didn't deal with the Japanese or, okay.
Didn't have to deal with those guys. The local contracts they had set up and everything.
You went to Oakland, and you went there once a quarter. You go for like a week?
Usually the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
And we'd fly out there on a Friday and then come back on a Sunday.
And flew out commercial on a government voucher?
Sometimes we had government planes, sometimes we do commercial.
Okay.
Depending on if anybody going that way.
And while you were doing all this reserve time, you worked for 7-Eleven?
7-Eleven.
And the management at 7-Eleven was liberal?
They were very supportive anyway.
Yes.
They never told me no.
More so than to the letter of the law, they were cooperative.
They were very cooperative.
Okay. My last comment I had here, who did you work for on the outside, but you told us you worked for 7-Eleven and then PetSmart.
PetSmart the last 8 years.
Okay.
I just recently retired last Friday, actually.
I think there are a number of interesting things in your story. First, you're starting a nuclear power program, which is pretty neat itself. And then since the Navy thought they needed supply officers, you switched over to supply. It's an interesting career pattern.
I was really, at the time, looking forward to being a nuclear power officer. I thought, well, I went through all this training. Surely that's what they want me to do. And I was really shocked that they didn't want to use that training. And I was disappointed I didn't get to use it.
Have you ever used anything you got in that MMA, the machinist mate A school?
I just handyman around the house. That's about it.
Okay. So you used it just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit.
But obviously the supply side in your retail, yes. you have used government.
Made a career out of retail.
Yeah.
Those 2 tours as exchange officer pretty much cemented my mentality and thoughts about making a career out of retail.
Well, good. We've expended my questions, sir. We appreciate you taking the time, Larry, to come and interview with us, and appreciate your time that you've given to the country, sir.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Appreciate it.